The prairie wind never ceased its mournful song across the sea of golden grass and forgotten graves. Evangeline knelt beside the nameless headstone, her brush gently scrubbing away another year of stubborn gray lichen. She had done this every Sunday for 20 years, honoring a promise whispered to a dying stranger. No one in the settlement understood her devotion to a grave that held no family and no history. They called her the Ghost Widow, a woman who wasted her youth on a phantom's memory. Evangeline did not care, for the locket she wore contained a face that demanded her faithfulness. The face was that of a young man with kind eyes, a strong jaw, and a name etched inside. The name was Caleb, and she had learned it only after he breathed his last ragged breath. It happened during a spring storm when she found him collapsed on the trail, a bullet in his chest. He had been trying to speak, to give her a message, but the blood stole his words. She dragged him to her cabin, cleaned the wound, and prayed with all her fragile human strength. By dawn he was gone, leaving her with only a silver locket and the weight of an unknown soul. She buried him on the highest knoll where the sunrise painted the grass in shades of fire. She carved no name on the wood, for she did not know his story or his sorrow. But she vowed aloud that he would never be forgotten, that someone would tend his resting place. 20 years passed, and her hair grew silver, but her commitment never wavered through drought or blizzard. The locket remained around her neck, a constant reminder that some debts require a lifetime of payment. She sometimes spoke to Caleb in the quiet evenings, telling him about the wildflowers and the migrating birds. She imagined who he might have been, a cowboy, a gambler, or perhaps a lost lover. But she never imagined that one day his exact living reflection would ride through the iron gate. It was a Tuesday when she heard the slow clop of hooves and saw the silhouette approach. A tall rancher dismounted, his hat shadowing a face she knew more intimately than her own. She clutched the locket and felt the world tilt on its axis, for Caleb had returned from the dead. But this man was older, his eyes sharper, and his voice a low rumble asking for directions. He said he was searching for a brother who vanished 20 years ago after a foolish quarrel. Evangeline could not speak, her trembling hand rising to touch the locket visible against her faded dress. The rancher noticed the silver gleam and stepped closer, his expression shifting from curiosity to stunned disbelief. He asked where she got that locket, his voice cracking like ice under a sudden weight. She led him to the grave on the knoll, and the man fell to his knees sobbing. His name was Jacob, and the buried stranger was his identical twin, the other half of his soul. He told her the bitter story of how they argued over their father's ranch, words like bullets. Caleb had ridden off into the storm, and Jacob had spent every year searching for him. He had followed whispers and rumors across 3 territories until the trail went cold near this valley. Now he found not his brother alive, but a woman who had guarded his memory with fierce tenderness. Jacob wept into the prairie sod, and Evangeline knelt beside him, her own tears falling freely. She described Caleb's final hours, how he fought to live, how he died with peaceful resignation. She gave Jacob the locket, but he pressed it back into her palm with trembling, gentle fingers. He said she had earned the right to keep it, for she had given his brother dignity. That night they sat by her hearth, and Jacob asked her to recount every detail she remembered. She told him about the storm, the fever, and the way Caleb's hand gripped hers at the end. Jacob listened with a hunger born of 2 decades of guilt that had gnawed at his spirit. He confessed that he had been the one who fired the warning shot that scared Caleb's horse. He never meant to harm him, only to stop him from leaving, but fate is a cruel marksman. Evangeline placed her hand over his and said that Caleb had forgiven him long before the end. She knew this because in his final moments, he whispered the word brother with a gentle smile. Jacob broke down again, and Evangeline held him as the fire crackled and the wind sang. Over the following days, Jacob helped her tend the grave, learning her rituals of care and remembrance. He repaired the iron gate, replaced the weathered wood with a proper limestone headstone carved with Caleb's name. Together, they planted wild rosebush around the knoll, their roots intertwining like their shared grief. Jacob found it difficult to leave, for the woman who had loved his brother's memory had captured his. He saw in her eyes a depth of compassion that no other soul had ever offered him. Evangeline felt a strange and beautiful stirring, a warmth that bloomed from the same ground as sorrow. She had spent 20 years loving a ghost, and now his living reflection stood before her. They walked the prairie at dusk, speaking of Caleb and of the life they might now build. Jacob admitted he felt his brother's blessing in the wind, a gentle push toward this extraordinary woman. One evening, under a sky blazing with stars, Jacob knelt and asked Evangeline to be his wife. He said he would spend the rest of his days honoring both his brother and her sacred vigil. She accepted with tears glistening like the silver locket, now hanging beside her heart forever. They were married at the graveside, with the prairie flowers as their only guests and witness. Jacob built a larger cabin on the land, and Evangeline's lonely knoll became a home filled with laughter. Each year on Caleb's anniversary, they sat together and told stories, keeping his spirit alive. Jacob never stopped grieving, but the grief transformed into a foundation of gratitude for Evangeline's faithfulness. The locket became a family heirloom, passed down to their daughter, along with the tale of devotion. The settlement that once pitied the ghost widow now celebrated her as the heart of the valley. Evangeline taught her children that love does not end at death, but changes form like sunrise. Jacob worked the ranch with a peace he had never known. His twins' memory no longer a curse. They grew old together, their hands weathered but always clasped, their conversations often drifting to Caleb. When Jacob's time finally came, he was laid beside his brother on the flowering knoll. Evangeline buried him with the same tender care she had given the stranger so many years ago. She lived on, the guardian of two graves, her love now encompassing both the lost and the found. Her hair turned white as winter snow, but her eyes still sparkled with the memory of that Tuesday. She often told the story to anyone who would listen about the stranger, the twin, and redemption. Visitors came from distant towns to hear the legend and see the wild roses blooming in the prairie. On the day she passed, the sky blazed crimson and gold, and a double rainbow arched above. They buried her beside Jacob and Caleb, the three of them united in a love beyond time. The iron gate still stands, and travelers say the wild roses release their sweetest fragrance at twilight. Some claim they see a woman's figure between two men, walking hand in hand across the grass. The locket rests as a museum, but its true power lives in the hearts of those who remember. So ends the legend of the woman who tended a stranger's grave until his twin arrived. She proved that devotion to a forgotten soul can bridge the gap between grief and true love. Thank you for witnessing this timeless tale of memory and love from West Old Stories Official. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to West Old Stories Official and like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us who you would tend a grave for.